Coding is a key word of this book. As a social science scholar, more or less you have to use this pervaded coding method in your research. On the surface, coding system seems to be an academic or scientific way that many social scientists use in their research. They came up to a research idea, raise a hypothesis, collect the data, and code this data to prove or refute their hypothesis. It is a very professional procedure already accepted widely in social science. However, the author was trying to argue that this coding method is not as scientific as it claims to be, and actually it has a lot of problems. What is coding? The author defined it as a word that may introduce an aura of scientism. It's just a sorting of texts, all of subunits such as paragraphs, according to a classificatory framework. The author pointed out that modern social scientists use coding results to establish facts. Specifically, the author stated, they do not only gather facts in the scientific frame, but also import these facts into the humanistic frame as a real appearance of a shared cultural universe. This is a very subjective process. From the beginning of you thinking up a research idea to you starting to collect the data towards that idea until you reporting your coding results. Even for the most delicate themes, the authoritative warrant becomes a sociologist's personal experience of the text. Therefore, we could also understand the coding process as a social construction process, in which the native speaks the savant reconstitutes its reality by the criteria proper to it. The author called the social scientist application of coding method as a ritual, and their research process a ritual production, which means that the coding method has been accepted as some kind of necessary or routine way that social scientists have to do in their research. Just like religion ritual, you never really question whether this ritual could really solve the problems or realize the wish you make. You just do it because it is a custom or a tradition done generation by generation. Even you know it's just a performance-like thing, you still do it or follow it. So do social scientists. Ritual production put their participants into a sequestered arena in which the cultural analyst, member of an imagined professional community, experiences a narration of discovery between two covers of a book. The reason they could do it, according to the author, is ambiguity, which the author also believed is cultural power. With this ambiguity, you could input the data as you like to get to the result you want. You could also draw a line between two phenomena and find their inner relationship. To make this game more professional, they also introduce elements of nature science into their ritual production, because social scientists have a logical need for ritual to paper over an epistemological chasm. However, social scientific coders leap from their particular facts to the general meaning not logically, not inductively, not inferentially, because all the ritual production is just their subjective production in the name of culture. Therefore, their coding is like a performance. The Nazi story is a good example to prove the author's argument. The author uses this case study to show that esteemed practitioners of social science are ready to substitute raw sources one for the other. Through analyzing Beerman and Stovall's Becoming a Nazi, in which they did the coding on the factors that turn people into Nazi, in the case of Harold D., the author found many questionable points on Beerman and Stovall's coding. Example 1. Beerman and Stovall adopted the term master identity to support their point on Nazis' illusion of social relations. They totally ignored previous scholars' opposite argument, which the author thinks not only alienates readers from historical context, but also empties out a dehistoriced space for them to re-envisioning the process of becoming a Nazi. Example 2. To avoid any questioning from readers about their logic, Behrman and Stovall adopted a strategy to convert the large non-measurable cultural effects into the so-called observable narrative structure of life stories, connected by causes. To make it more decent, they also attached the graphic representation on it, which the author named it a play of ritual. Example 3. Another play in Becoming a Nazi is iconographic. Behrman and Stovall used this figure to demonstrate the structure of Harold D's life before and after becoming a Nazi. However, as fancy as this figure is, the author questioned the figure for its lack of historical coherence by proposing the questions that, should this analogy between breakdowns be taken soberly? If Harold D's self at the time of writing in 1934 is incoherent, how could that weakness not be projected onto the opening of his autobiography? If the data are cross-sectional from one sitting, so to speak, how did Harold D mobilize strong narrative selfhood at one instant of writing and lose it in the next? Example 4. When Behrman and Stovall infer the factor of cutting ties with family is one of the features of becoming Nazi, the author argued that a young person severs ties from family could accompany becoming a Nazi. It also accompanies becoming an adult. Example 5. Another questionable point that the author pointed out in Behrman and Stovall's coding is that the incidents of communion with strangers while traveling do not lead to the Nazi folk community, because it's just the reverse. Illustrating the Nazi folk community leads to the incidents of communion with strangers while traveling. The author believed that due to the blurring of scientific variables, social scientists could give free interpretation even when they lack reference and conventional sense. In this case, the author commented that it is bewildering that Behrman and Stovall report facts about what is missing in Harold D's accounts when the relevant content was accessed prior to their examination. And he thinks that this method for coding of narratives diffused internationally, yet the supposedly empirical object of inquiry on which it rests, a Nazi narrative, becomes practically invisible, since it is substitutable without limit, and its shape is entirely constructed rather than inspired.